Let's take a look at the charts, shall we?
Well, Mr. Funny Man, is this how you get your sick kicks?
What? It's just an ordinary crabby. Oh my goodness!
Okay, June 23rd it is. So, before the whole X fiasco and Hurricane Drake hit Billboard back-to-back, both of which are too draining for me to discuss at length, about half the top 20 still had the same songs from spring. So what I'm gonna do is exclude any song that's already been in the top 20 in a prior season, and choose the next one down. The reason being that 1, I'd like to get more opinions out there, and 2, since overplay is pretty much an inevitable factor for repeats despite it being an unfair assessment to a song's quality, at least for me, it wouldn't feel right ranking them here. And this goes for future rankings too. The results of this rule are in the description, and as always, this is just my opinion, so here it is. My not-so-official summer top 20 ranking that was actually from a couple weeks ago. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Brand new whip, got no keys. Tell them my clothes, no starch, please. Soon as I nut, you can go leave. Got M's in the bank, like yes, indeed. Cartier glasses, I won't even pick.
If Meant to Be was as boring as doing math homework, then Yes Indeed is like going to the DMV. This isn't even 2.5 minutes long, yet it's such a slog that by the time it reaches a minute, I'm already worn out. It'd be easy to blame Drake for this given how much he's oversaturated the current market and with how dry and bland his music has often come off recently, but he's actually the best part of this by far. His throwaway guest verse may not be anything special, but he at least has a stable vocal trajectory and passable flow. Meanwhile, Lil Baby has one of the most inept performances on any rap song released this year. People complain about how MCs like Future or 21 Savage all sound the same or are too monotone, but say what you want about those guys, they at least have somewhat of a recognizable sound and unique personality. Lil Baby doesn't, he just sounds like a much whinier and more inexperienced version of Gucci Mane. His tedious wailing is completely insufferable, and when it's over a beat so flaccid it makes Gucci Gang look like a piece colorful enough to be on a Kendrick Lamar album, as well as lyrics that, when they aren't super generic, include lines like Jewish like he voodoo and then crying like an actual baby. It undoubtedly deserves the bottom spot. Oh hey, look at that, it's Drake again.
I'm upset. 50,000 on my head is disrespect. So offended that I had to double check. I'ma always take.
I don't dislike Drake. He's shown he can pull off multiple styles and genres as most are forced to do in order to sustain a blossoming career as long as his. And when he really puts his mind to it, he can make some high quality hip hop, R&B, or meme. However, Drake's music in 2018 seems to for the most part have less captivating qualities than ever before, blending in with the downbeat SoundCloud-esque landscape, yet far exceeding all of his contemporaries in terms of chart success. Which brings me to this bore of a song. Like the previous track, I'm Upset sounds totally dead in the water. Drake tries to sound angry and intimidating but ends up sounding half asleep. The instrumental sounds like a lullaby at best, as it sounds like it came from one of those $50 keyboards you had at age 7 with a ridiculously slow tempo. And when you put it into the context as part of the Pusha T beef, it seems even more pathetic. The general attitude presented as well as the actual song are unreasonably weak. Seriously. The only thing differentiating this from any other old rap song is the music video, which, instead of featuring dozens of strippers, has the Degrassi cast reunite. Which, come to think of it, makes me wonder why Drake isn't shown in a wheelchair.
Wait, can you turn around? Can you turn around? Just wait. Can we work this out? Can we work this out? Just wait.
Not the worst song on the list, but definitely the one with the least to say about it. It's yet another soulless trap pop cash-in with forgettable everything and doesn't warrant any further explanation. Moving on.
You supermodel, that ass busting out the bottom. I'ma lose my mind in it. Crazy that medulla oblongata. Get the rubbing on my lap, get the chini up.
So, Kanye had 3 album bombs earlier this year, and out of all of them, Ye is easily my least favorite. Not that it was terrible or anything, but when compared to the raw strength and presence of Pusha T on Daytona, or the mind-blowing chemistry with Kid Cudi and near-flawless tracklist on Kids See Ghost, it just doesn't get up to their level. But there were still a few highlights on the record, so I didn't mind one of the songs from the project reaching this list. That is, until I discovered it happened to be the worst song on Ye, because this is just a mess. Kanye's sexually charged and over-the-top ego being presented here isn't inherently an issue, but when it's put over this minimal, bass-heavy beat, it just doesn't flatter him at all, and makes Kanye come off as too goofily disconnected rather than bombastic or cathartic. The bass hits themselves are too loud and awkwardly placed within the mix, making them stick out like a sore thumb. And then to make matters worse, there's another spaced out and even more abrasive and poorly mixed synth in the last pre-chorus. But the worst part has gotta be that squeaky, high-pitched hook, with the singing sounding less like a falsetto and more like what happens when a cartoon character gets kicked in the balls for an elongated period of time. Not Kanye's worst song of all time, but it's down there.
Be careful with me. Do you know what you're doing? Whose feelings that you hurting and bruising?
I may not be a huge fan of Cardi B like so many others have been, but I still think she's only mediocre at worst, and every once in a while does have a pretty fantastic verse in her. But this is just disappointingly lackluster. Cardi B is a lot more competent a rapper than she is a singer, which is proven by her very strange and uncomfortable vocals on the hook. And while the muted Lauryn Hill sample sounds kinda nice, and putting aside the fact that Offset could top this in his sleep, the verses are perfectly fine. This just doesn't captivate me in any way, and I probably won't be listening to it anytime soon.
Cause girls like you run around with guys like me till sundown. When I come through, I need a girl like you, yeah, yeah. Girls like...
Hey, remember that one song from Maroon 5 that sounded like an air conditioner? Well, here's the sequel. I don't know when they're gonna pick up on this, but having a half-decent bass line isn't enough to carry an entire song. And sure, as background noise, this works perfectly fine, but that's not why I listen to music. Everything about this just screams radio fodder to me. And Girls Like You is even less captivating than What Lovers Do, because of the noticeable downgrade from a great performer to a merely okay one. And while Cardi's verse isn't bad by any means, it does not fit in with the rest of the track whatsoever. It's like putting Missy Elliott in a Green Day song. Not bad, just mediocre.
Haven't I made it obvious? Haven't I made it clear? Want me to spell it out for you? FriEnDZone.
This is gonna be a long one. I've liked most of what I've heard from Marshmello thus far, as he strikes me as a good producer as well as someone who can change their aesthetic whenever appropriate. As working with people from Migos to Khalid, in addition to making Skrillex-like EDM songs solo, all require very different tastes and styles to flatter each unique sound. However, this is among his few duds and probably the worst Marshmello song to chart on the Hot 100. His production on this song has a few redeeming qualities, those being the guitars, harmonizations, and some of the melodies, but the obnoxious horns, turgent drop on the chorus, and that god-awful section with the piercing synths towards the end bring this down quite a few notches to say the least. But then there's Anne-Marie, who I can safely say doesn't mesh well with Marshmello at all. Her vocal melodies either don't fit the more abrasive tone of the song in the slightest or are stretched out to a concerning degree, and her spoken word parts are just excruciating.
Don't mess it up, talking that shit.
Lyrically, this seems to take somewhat of a similar route to I Don't Give a Fuck. But what made that track work so well was Dua Lipa's incredible vocal talent, as well as writing that paints her as forward-thinking and sturdy. Though there certainly have been much more severe failures in this department, when your song is literally titled the official FriEnDZone anthem, it just comes across really desperate, bitter, and pathetic, with very few if any convincing details as to why the repetition of the sentiment is justified. I get that maybe the guy in question won't leave her alone to the point where it warrants this much vigor and aggression, but as the listener, someone who cannot relate to the situation whatsoever, it feels like Anne-Marie is shouting at a nearby wall to stop flirting with her, because it lacks the conviction to make me stand with her, unlike someone like Dua Lipa or, I don't know, Zara Larsson. It's the same uncomfortable feeling you get when your lab partners keep complaining about a breakup they had 6 months ago, and you just want them to shut up so you can turn in your project and get a good grade, goddamn. I don't despise it as much as some others do, but sadly the negatives outweigh the positives on this one.
Whatever it takes, 'cause I love the adrenaline in my veins. I do whatever it takes.
Many people say this is one of the better songs off Evolve, and yeah, I would agree, but that's more because the album is a pretty big mess rather than the song actually being good. It's very straightforward, with the standard 4-chord progression forming a very natural sounding build-up to the appropriately executed chorus. But that's kind of it, really. It fulfilled the standard song structure exactly how it was supposed to do the whole way through, meaning it's not a bad song, but not really a good one either. It's the most predictable song on the list.
I'm in district in the chain. Certified, you know I'm gang, 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 gang.
Considering trap and Latin pop have a history of mixing almost as badly as trap and country, I'm inclined to appreciate this a bit more because it could have sucked. A lot. The sample serves as a good anchor for the song, and the trap elements are introduced to the Latin influence of the song well, courtesy of Cardi B's natural presence in both genres, as well as several others. However, I still feel this song is pretty overrated, as Cardi's performance still comes across awkwardly at times, and J Balvin and Bad Bunny do nothing to elevate the song. It's one of those tracks where the elements just kind of balance out, and I'm left with basically no reaction to the song one way or the other. This is basically just Mercy again with a bit more swell, and I'm pretty okay with that honestly. There's a good amount of bombast within the guitar-driven production, and Mendes puts a lot of genuine heart into his vocal performance, and it pays off pretty well. It may not stand out beyond being a decent ballad, but it doesn't really need to. It's simple but effective. I'll take it.
I know I'd go back to you.
For those of you who don't know, Selena Gomez has essentially been the backbone to the Netflix show 13 Reasons Why, so it makes sense that she would also take part in the soundtrack. Back to You is an acoustic-driven pop tune with a good grasp on its aesthetic and a no-nonsense approach to admitting not being over a guy, even though Selena knows deep down he's probably not right for her. It's a lyrical setup that I've really come to appreciate, because with so many songs like this being bitter and closed-minded, it's nice to hear someone admit their faults as a part of the relationship in question, and take a more mature position through it all. Solid tune. Yay, controversial opinion time.
Watch the breakdown.
I mean, it's decent, but I really don't see the hype. I mean, yes, the Lauryn Hill sample is fun and energetic, the lyrics are more optimistic and inclusive than usual, and Drake sounds more invested than he has been for quite some time. And I think the reason this is so praised is 110% because of that last one. With how much Drake has occupied the top of the charts lately, and with how downbeat and lifeless so much of it is, a song with an actual pulse made by the biggest star of the decade sounds like God's gift to men by default. And while I am glad this is the next big #1, merely being an upbeat and lively party jam doesn't get you any higher than this, at least for me. Decent, but not great.
You know I said that I am better now, better now. I only say that cause you're not around, not around. You know I never meant to let you down, let you down.
This is a relatively average song off Beer Bongs and Bentleys, which was an above average album, so there you go. Better Now is a well-written and well-produced breakup song, with intimate details and Melon's solid vocal performance making this one of the biggest hits off the album, but not one of the best. Other songs have done this one shtick in a far more compelling way, so this just kind of blends in with the track list. Still, it's a good enough listen. I want to like this song much more than I actually do. I'm typically a huge sucker for this type of smooth and provocative R&B slow jam, and I guess that kind of applies here. The warm piano chords, Ella's sultry vocals, love-struck lyrics, silky production, textured percussion reminiscent of early 2000s R&B. There's a lot to like about this song, but it kinda loses me after like half the runtime a lot of the time, unfortunately. Likely due to a lot of the elements running together with no truly great factor or transcendent atmosphere to carry this all the way home. It feels weirdly restrained for a ballad that's focused on being so lush and spacious, and it mostly succeeds at that, but I feel like it could have been a little bit better.
Everybody's talking about heaven like they just can't wait to go, saying how it's gonna be so good, so...
Kane Brown did not make a first good impression with What Ifs last year. A country song that gets more phony and nasal with every listen. But I'm glad he quickly improved with his next single, as the husky twang in his vocal tone was done justice this time around, with the more relaxed and authentic production on this song. Instead of blending in and just feeling like extra noise, Brown contrasts off the instrumental this time, making it much more pleasing to the ear. It hits that simple but heartfelt and genuine sweet spot. Sure, the lyrics are the same old lovey-dovey fluff, and it's not an exceptionally memorable listen, but it is still a good one, and highly preferable to the garbagey drum machine-infused country further down the Hot 100.
I still see your shadows in my room. Can't take back the love that I gave you. It's to the point where I love and I hate.
I'm surprised this ended up so high. After all, the lyrics are really frustrating in the inverse way Anne Marie was on Friends, with lines like,
"Who knew evil girls had the prettiest face? You were made out of plastic, fake, and I cannot change you, so I must replace you."
Oh, boo-hoo! Let me play a sad song for you on the world's smallest violin.
However, I cannot deny that the heartbroken and crackly vocal performance is very convincing and very effective. Reminds me of a more trap-influenced Mike Posner. And then there's the production, which despite being taken from a Sting song, still sounds pretty organic through the heavier mixing and Juice WRLD's unique spin on it. And the melody itself is a lot more delicate and complex than most SoundCloud rap, consistently descending and then turning around to a wider note pattern and then resolving very differently than expected. Though this is pretty good, I still can't ignore its distressingly immature writing. And this isn't even the first hit to take influence from what I can only assume is an insecure high schooler. 2018, the year of the angsty teenager. What a time to be alive.
Dive bar on the east side, where you at? Phone lights at my nightstand in the black. Come here, you can meet me in the back.
This was a pleasant surprise. I've always preferred Taylor's softer side when she's in more lush ballad-like territory, as since she's indeed a very gifted vocalist, she then can express many different states of love or turmoil or somewhere in between. That and her edgier songs usually suck, so you could imagine I wasn't a very big fan of Reputation. With a few exceptions, this of course being one of them. Delicate puts Taylor in a very vulnerable and isolated position where she's shocked and all the more grateful for her partner's loyalty despite her reputation. The cloudy vocal encoders put over the pristinely steamy instrumental, all is just sort of glowing in the distance instead of blowing up in the chorus like it usually does. All kind of reminds me of Imogen Heap, who's not someone I thought I'd be comparing to Taylor Swift. The lyrics are sort of vague and its atmosphere doesn't do anything exceptional, hence why it's not higher, and also restrains it from being among her best work, but still a very good song nonetheless.
Hey, yeah. Right now I'm in a state of mind. I wanna be in like all the time.
I generally see two different consensuses when it comes to this song. Most either think it's pretty good but could have been improved, or it's an untouchable masterpiece that's the best thing Grande has ever done. Personally, I would fall somewhere in the middle. While I do think it is a fantastic pop song, I do think she's done better and it's not quite one of the best of the year. That being said, No Tears Left to Cry is a genre-blending, aesthetically bright, and overall grand track. Starts off as a slow ballad, then turns into a dance pop track during the verses, and then on the hook sort of combines the two with the synth retaining its tempo but is relegated to the background and it's pitched deeper, and then after that just kinda runs with it. From a broader point of view, the transitioning is a little wonky, but the sections themselves go together surprisingly well, and the cherry on top is the vocal performance. The way Ariana constantly shifts moods with her more passive singing to her more passionate delivery to her straight up belting is impeccable, and it all adds up to a magnificent pop song.
This is America. Don't catch you slipping now. Don't catch you slipping now. Look what I'm whipping now.
After Childish Gambino, aka Donald Glover, solidified himself as a quintuple threat in the industry, what he would do next was unpredictable. And sure enough, we got this thing. A dark, trippy, and menacing experience that's so mesmerizing it immediately caused everyone to endlessly memify it from day one. Seriously, endless. For a song that barely has a melody, the production sure has a lot going on, from the industrial sound and eerie synth takeover, to the horrific screams blending into the background, which transitions into a gospel/ukulele section on the hook, with Glover's stellar falsetto, to the ingenious incorporation of uncredited vocals from the likes of Kodak Black, 21 Savage, Quavo, and many others to further accentuate the unorthodox tone. And it's surprisingly solid aesthetically too, proving a point while also constructing a catchy rap song, something many of his contemporaries commonly fail to do. As for the lyrics, I'm usually extremely skeptical of the whole saying less by saying more trope, because to me it just seems like a lazy excuse for artists to spew out a bunch of nonsense and then pass it off as deep and meaningful. In fact, on the bullshit-o-meter, it would probably go right here. But through the ambition and distinctivity Glover possesses, I do think he deserves an exception, essentially criticizing many norms of the hip-hop landscape, but doing so within reason, as it also admits their addictivity and doesn't ever go off the deep end within its commentary. And while personally it wouldn't even be in my top 3, I could see why this would be a Gambino favorite for many others.
One kiss is all it takes. Falling in love with me. Possibilities. I look like all you need. One kiss is all it takes.
This may seem like a weird choice for number 1. After all, the last two were much bigger and grander songs that would fit the mold of a number 1 a lot more. But One Kiss just does everything right. When Calvin Harris announced he was done with electro-funk, I was disappointed yet glad, because it showed Harris didn't want to stagnate on one sound. And sure enough, his collaboration with the current queen of pop is as fresh as ever. Combining deep house with elevator music might just be one of the best ideas I've heard in my life, and Dua Lipa's near flawless vocals make it all the better. Her relatively calm inflections make this all the more enjoyable, and the flattery melodies, jazzy horns, and fantastic synth tones create a lot of versatility throughout the song and are all handled exceptionally well. The beachy vibe is so strong it makes it the perfect song of the summer, and to me, deserves the top spot on this ranking. So overall, this ranking tallied up a total of 7 points. So pretty much the same as Spring's 8 points in terms of quality. I guess the more things change, the less they change. And next time I'll be doing something a little different.